Hello and welcome to Archaeologists Anonymous. I'm your host Silvia, and today we are addressing the incredibly controversial question, should we return looted artifacts from museums? So, this is a pretty heavy topic, and like all controversial issues like this, I'm always open to hearing new arguments or information, so feel free to add that sort of thing respectfully in the comments below. And I just ask that all of us approach this topic with an open mind. Okay, so in 2013, there was a protest by a group called Idle No More about the British Museum holding artifacts from South America. A protester named Amaru explained that he wanted the British Museum to return artifacts which he said were looted from his people. To Amaru and those who sympathize with him, seizing other people's cultural heritage and proudly displaying it in a museum feels wrong.
How do you think your ancestors got these? You think they paid a fair price?
And symbolizes the tragic brutality of imperialism. However, Amaru's opponents point to things like the fires at Brazil museums, and question whether the artifacts would be safe if they were returned. The British have used similar logic in the past to justify holding on to the Elgin marbles from Greece. However, Greece recently built a state-of-the-art museum at the Acropolis to hold the Elgin marbles to cancel out that argument. There is also the case of the Nok figurines, which were taken from Benin City in Nigeria by the British, but they're currently in museums throughout the world, and some have been returned and some haven't, and issues like these are currently being litigated all over the world, sometimes with different results. But why is it important to figure out who gets to own artifacts? Tell me why. In a survey, 97% of Americans said that artifacts were a valuable learning tool, and in this country, getting 97% of Americans to agree on anything is pretty remarkable. Artifacts are valuable for research, they can attract tourists, which brings in money to the economy, and artifacts can also represent identity and culture. You know, when you see a mummy in a sarcophagus, you think Egypt. When you see an Aztec censer, you think of Mesoamerica. So artifacts can be incredibly meaningful to an entire culture. And on a larger scale, artifacts embody the universal human urge to create and leave a mark, a legacy in the world.
Legacy. What is a legacy?
So, who gets to own artifacts decides who gets access to all of these benefits. And importantly, who does not. So, what should we do with looted artifacts then? Oh, you know, artifacts taken problematically. Should we return them?
That's a great question, Mark.
First, let's examine the arguments in favor of fully returning all looted artifacts. So we on the let's fully return the looted artifacts generally have two points of view. Our first is a more ethical argument. This ethical argument suggests that, you know, the descendants of the people who made the artifacts should get to have them. You know, the artifact should be returned to the descendants of their creators. It is morally problematic to house looted artifacts because the museum who has them is profiting off of a stolen culture while keeping the artifact's benefits out of the hands of the descendants of the people who originally made them.
That's messed up, man. That's messed up.
The more ethics-minded people on our side of the argument also suggest that there's a danger for misrepresentation and trivialization of cultures that are perceived as foreign. Because of the legacy of imperialism, looted artifacts are often more like trophies to celebrate conquest than important cultural artifacts. The second kind of argument on our return all the artifacts side is a bit more Darwinian. This point of view essentially assigns responsibility to each culture for its own preservation. Essentially, every culture to themselves. You take care of your own artifacts. Your artifact, your problem. They argue that Britain shouldn't be spending money housing artifacts from Nigeria, or that Nigeria not spend any money housing artifacts from Egypt. So it is this sort of Darwinian, everyone deal with your own stuff kind of argument that those people on our side have. There's also the pragmatic argument that returning artifacts can be good for diplomacy, and for the more Machiavellian people, used as a bargaining chip. So yeah, people on our side either make the ethics argument, or they point to the more pragmatic or Darwinian side of the question. Those are some good points. Now let's look at the side who is against a return all policy for looted artifacts. the opponents to the return all policy argue that it can be difficult to figure out exactly where to put them back. History is way too complicated for that. For example, hundreds of years ago, the Chinese traded porcelain with East African coastal civilizations. That Chinese porcelain was legitimately paid for and integrated into the culture of East Africa. Yet, its place of origin is China. Where should the porcelain go?
I don't know.
Occasionally, concepts of theft and ownership were sometimes seen as different in the past. For example, when the ancient Romans seized Greek art, it was seen as, rightful loot taken from conquest. What qualifies as unjustly looted can change over time. And this is just the start of the complexity. We have to remember that people and cultures are not stationary. Should Greek-made pottery from Iran, created when the Greeks controlled the region, go to Iran or to Greece? Should Navajo beads go to where they were created, or should they go to where the Navajo are now? And furthermore, there's the question of just how close an artifact needs to be put back. For example, the National Museum of Brazil had artifacts from the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Brazil is a substantial distance away from these locations. Is this close enough? But if we want to get closer, there can't exactly be a museum on every street corner. So while it may sound straightforward to put all the artifacts back, it's really not that simple, and we who are against a return all policy say that it is so complicated to the point of being practically impossible.
This deal is getting worse all the time.
So, you can see how this is a crazy, complicated, controversial issue now, right? In my opinion, I think that the artifact's safety should be preserved above all else. It's not worth returning an artifact if the people in the region where it's from won't be able to enjoy it for long. However, with this vital safety concern out of the way, I do think that having looted artifacts in a museum is highly problematic, for all of the reasons stated by that side of the debate. And I think that just because it can often be really hard to pin down where an artifact should go, does not mean that we should give up entirely. I think that we should try and be pragmatic here. We're not going to be able to return all of the looted artifacts at once, but we can take things on a case-by-case basis, and we can address the most important or the most high profile of the looted artifacts. Let's focus on the victories that we can achieve, and I think returning a decent chunk of the looted artifacts is definitely a step in the right direction, and realistic. It's gonna take a lot of litigation and, fighting things out in the court of public opinion and that sort of thing, but I do think it is doable, and safely at that. I do think that museums should publish their provenances online. Tell us where you got those artifacts. And a number of museums have started publishing provenances online. I think that'll actually help ease the process of figuring out which looted artifacts can be realistically returned. And there are also promising alternatives or compromises to artifact ownership. Museums can share artifacts in a rotation, so, half of the year it's in one place and half of the year it's in another place, as long as the transfer of the artifact is able to be done safely, and museums can also display replicas of an artifact. Copies are not as useful for research, and they're not quite as cool as having the original artifact, but I certainly think it's better than nothing. And in some cases, they can actually enhance the museum experience because visitors can safely touch them without worrying that they'll be damaging a priceless artifact. It's just a replica. And though artifacts can only be in one place at one time, virtual or augmented reality can help provide alternative experiences that help visitors engage with the past. These sorts of alternatives show a lot of promise, and museums should look into them. So this is an incredibly fast-moving issue, and there's no way I'm going to cover everything in a short video. However, it is clear that people care about artifacts. People care about the past. There wouldn't be a controversy about all this if it wasn't incredibly important to us. The material history of our civilizations helps us understand what it means to be human, and people in the future are probably going to be arguing over what to do with the artifacts we create in the 21st century. Alright, thank you so much for watching. I've been Silvia of Archaeologists Anonymous. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.